So today's video is about measurement conversions. So, what is measurement? Measurement is how we are basically looking at the length of something, we're looking at the weight of something, or we're looking at the capacity or how much volume something has, how much space is on the inside of it. So, when you are talking about measurement conversions, you're basically talking about how we are converting or we're changing from one unit of measurement to another unit of measurement. So, the first thing we need to talk about, well, what are the two systems that we use for measurement? So, there's the metric system, which is the table that you're looking at now. The metric system is basically all about meters, liters, and grams. So if you want to measure the length of something, then you would be using meters. If you're measuring the weight of something, you would be using grams. And if you're measuring the capacity or how much something can hold, you measure that in liters. Now, the metric system is really popular overseas. It's pretty much the only standard system that they use. Here in America, we kind of bounce between both of them. Like you might hear, like in a track and field game, they're talking about the 100-meter dash, which means that people are running 100 meters, or they talk about the 200-meter run, or, you know, so, and then like sodas are sold in 2-liter bottles, but then we can buy milk in gallons. So in America, we kind of bounce between the two systems. So this system, the metric system, is based all around meters, liters, and grams. And then you have these prefixes. So let's say you need 1,000 meters. If you need to measure something really, really big, like the distance from North Carolina to like Michigan, you don't want to measure that in meters. You want to measure that in something bigger. So you use what are called kilometers. Then let's say you want to measure something that's really, really small, like the tip of your finger. You might want to measure that using millimeters, because that's a measurement for really, really tiny things. So in the metric system, you have things that are used for big things, which are the kilo, and then you have things for really, really small things, which is the milli. And if you'll notice in the table, you have a kilometer, which is a really big meter, kilogram, which is something that's really heavy, like an elephant, or kiloliters, which is like how much water you put in like a pool. And then you have something really small like millimeter, like I said, which might be like the length of your eyelash, or then milligrams might be the weight of something like a cotton ball, and then milliliters might be, you know, how much, you know, water can be whole, you know, how much water is in like a drop of water. So the metric system is all about meters, liters, and grams. Then we have the customary system, which is what you should be really familiar with. This is inches, feet, yards, miles, ounces, pounds, cups, pints, gallons. So what are measurements conversions? When you need to basically switch from one unit of measurement to another, you have to use a measurement conversion. And a measurement conversion is basically a ratio that tells you how you can change from one unit of measurement to another. It's giving you a comparison. For example, you guys have all seen that there are 12 inches in a foot. That's a measurement conversion. It's a ratio. It's comparing how many inches it's going to take to equal just 1 foot. So that ratio can be used to help us solve problems or change from inches to feet, or from feet back to inches. So if you're going from a smaller unit, so we basically say the measurement conversions are basically the bridge to get from one unit to another unit. If I want to change from one thing to another, I need to cross a bridge, and that bridge is that measurement conversion, or that ratio. So if I'm going from a smaller unit to a larger unit, I'm going to divide by the measurement conversion. If I'm going from a larger unit to a smaller unit, I'm going to multiply by the measurement conversion. And I'm sure you did that a lot in elementary school. So here are some conversion charts, because, you know, in order to do a measurement conversion, you need to know what those ratios are. And you guys should be pretty familiar with some of these. Like there's 16 ounces in a pound, there's 2,000 pounds in a ton. So we're going to basically be using these ratios to help us make conversions. And then I'm sure you guys have seen Gallon Man, and I'm sure you've seen this as well. Some of you also have seen Gallon Land, which also helps you see how many quarts are in a gallon, how many pints are in a quart, all of that. And all of those are measurement conversions, or ratios. So now one that you probably aren't familiar with is just doing those conversions with the metric system. And the conversion chart for the metric system are still ratios. It's going to take me 1,000 meters to get 1 kilometer. So you're still going to be basically, even within the conversion, within the metric system, using conversion charts and, you know, those ratios. So sometimes you can even go from one unit to the other unit. Like I might want to change from inches to centimeters, or I might want to go from feet to meters, or I might want to go from tons to kilograms. So we can even use some of these charts to help us go from the customary system to the metric system, or vice versa. So how do you convert from one unit to another? There's two options. One option is to use a proportion. The second option is to multiply or divide by the conversion factor. So one thing that might help you remember if you're trying to decide should you multiply or divide, if you're going from a small unit to a larger unit, you divide. If you're going from a larger unit to a smaller unit, you multiply. And just remember, you can remember this kind of little rhyme. Horse to fly, multiply. Fly the horse, divide, of course. So if I'm going from a horse, which is something big, to a fly, which is something small, I multiply. If I go from a fly, which is something small, to a horse, which is something big, I divide. So that rhyme might be something that helps some of you remember when to multiply and when to divide. So let's look at option 1, using a proportion. You measured your height to be 60 inches. How tall are you in feet? So I'm going to use the measurement conversion that 1 foot equals 12 inches. So when I'm using this proportion, remember a proportion is two ratios that are equal to each other. Well, my conversion chart, or my conversion factor, this 1 foot equals 12 inches, that's one of the ratios. And I always want to make sure that my first ratio will be the ratio that's given in the conversion chart. So my first ratio will be the conversion factor given in the problem or in the chart. And then my second ratio is going to be what has been given to me in the problem, and then of course whatever is missing will be my ratio, will be my variable. So here they told me my height is 60 inches, so that's going to go at the bottom, and then on the top I'm going to put F for feet because I don't know how tall I am in feet. That's what I'm trying to find. So then now I just need to solve the ratio, solve the proportion. So I'm going to cross multiply. Once I do that, I'm going to end up with 12 times F on one side and 60 times 1 on the other. And then 12 times F is just 12F, and then 60 times 1 is 60. And then now I need to solve the equation. So I need to divide both sides by 12. These cancel out, and then I'm left with that F equals 5. So since F stands for feet, this means that you are 5 feet tall. So if your height is 60 inches, that basically means, if I wanted to show that in feet, that I am 5 feet tall. So another way that we can solve a proportion problem is to do option 2, which is multiply or divide by the conversion factor. So in science class, you are filling a 2-liter bucket with water. Your beaker can hold 1 centiliter of water. How many beakers will it take to fill the bucket with water? And I know that 1 liter equals 100 centiliters. So I want to multiply or divide by the conversion factor. So one way that the step method can help you, and we're going to talk more about that in class, but one way that the step method can help you is you can help you figure out if you're going from something small to something big, or something big to something small. So in this problem, we are starting with liters. So that means we're going to start here on the base unit step. And then we're changing it to centiliters. So if I have to go down the stairs, as I'm going down the stairs, the units are going to get smaller. So that means I'm going from a larger unit to a smaller unit. I'm going down the stairs. This means I need to multiply by the conversion factor. So that means I'm going to take my 2 liters, I'm going to multiply it by 100, and my final answer will be that it would be 200 centiliters. So there are 200 centiliters in 2 liters. That means it will take 200 beakers to fill the bucket with water. Example 3, you're making costumes for the school play. Each costume will need 19.5 feet of fabric. The fabric store charges $2.48 per yard of fabric. How much will it cost to make each costume, knowing that 3 feet equals 1 yard? So again, I'm going to be looking at option 2 when I'm multiplying or dividing. So I have to be thinking, okay, the costume is measured in feet, but the fabric store is measuring things in yards. They're charging by the yard. So I have got to convert from feet to yards. So the question is, what am I starting with? I'm starting with feet. What am I changing it to? I'm changing it to yards. So if I'm going from feet to yards, I have to think, okay, is feet smaller or bigger? Well, feet are smaller. So that means I'm going from a smaller unit to a larger unit. So small to large means that I need to divide. Fly to horse, divide, of course. So that means I'm going to take 19.5 feet and I'm going to divide it by 3, which gives me 6.5 yards. So I'm going to basically need 6.5 yards of fabric. So since we need 6.5 yards of fabric and the fabric costs $2.48 per yard, we're going to multiply to get our total cost. So then $2.48 times 6.5 equals $16.12. So it's going to cost me $16.12 to make each costume. So in America, we measure driving distances in miles. In Europe, they measure driving distances in kilometers. if you drive 77 and 2800 kilometers in Europe, how many miles would that be if you drove the same distance in America? And the conversion factor is that 1 mile equals 1.61 kilometers. So that means that's my ratio. They are comparing miles to kilometers. 1 mile is equal to 1.61 kilometers. So for this one, I'm going to set up a proportion. Remember, my first ratio is going to be from the given conversion factor. That's going to be my first ratio. The second ratio is going to take from the problem, what do I know, what do I have, and then what do I need a variable for. So I'm going to set it up where I've got 1 mile over 1.61 kilometers. And then in the problem, they gave me 77.28 kilometers. Because kilometers is at the bottom of this ratio, it's going to be at the bottom of this one. So the 77.28 goes at the bottom. And then what I don't know is miles. So I'm going to put a variable for that. So then now I need to solve the proportion. I need to cross multiply. When I cross multiply, it's going to give me 1.61 times m equals 77.28. I'm going to divide both sides by 1.61 to get the variable m alone. These cancel out, and it leaves me with that m equals 48. So since m is miles, that means you drove 48 miles. So if you drive 77.28 kilometers in Europe, that's the same as driving 48 miles here in America, which is about the distance from here to, the far side of Durham. So basically, in the end, what you guys want to make sure that you do is you want to know what method you're going to use. Are you going to do a proportion, or are you going to set up are you going to set up a proportion, or are you going to multiply or divide? Be careful with the multiplication and division one. You have to know whether you're going from small to large or large to small. That's very, very important. With the proportion, you don't have to worry about that. You just got to make sure you are lining up your ratios and putting the units in the correct spot on your ratios. But either way, if you're making a conversion, you want to make sure that you're putting in that conversion factor and you're using it. Don't forget to teach to the tiger everything that you learned today.